Hello. What's going on, guys? It is, what is it, Tuesday morning? Yeah, Tuesday morning, June 4th. Welcome to PT Breakfast Club. I'm flying solo for just a minute. Dave's going to join me here. We had some tech issues going on, but, you know, I shared a post recently, and when Dave comes on, I'm going to talk about it, where I started to introduce the idea of a productized service. I think that there's huge value in it. I think it's good for the profession. I think it's good for the patient. And I think it's good for the therapist. So I want to discuss it. We're going to build it around the LegalZoom model. I'm going to share this live stream out across a couple platforms. So just give me one moment. And if you guys are joining, obviously leave a comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I wonder where my co-host is. All right. So for those of you who don't know, LegalZoom is a $1.6 billion company. That's the market cap. They've started years ago, and the basic premise is simple. So for 100 years, if I was a consumer and I wanted to start a business, I would have to go hire an attorney to draft up the legal documents to start a business, whether it be a corporation or an LLC or professional liability or professional corporation. I had to hire an attorney, and that would cost hundreds of dollars per hour. But the reality is that attorney would be working from some sort of framework that the attorney had created over multiple years of attorney experience. And with that, Dave, what's going on?
Morning.
Good morning. So I went ahead and started without you, but you're going to jump right in. So I was talking about productized services. I was introducing the concept of LegalZoom. But since you're here, I'm going to put that on the back burner. Guys, we're going to talk about that later in the episode. What I want to talk about with Dave is Caitlyn Clark. Now, we talked about her previously. We talked about the Nike contract. We talked about the WNBA. I've got a clip queued up. I'm going to see if I can get this. And I'm sure you heard, did you hear Charles Barkley talking about Caitlyn Clark and referencing LeBron James?
No, I don't know what clip you're talking about.
Let me see. I've got that here. You guys should be able to hear it. I'm just going to play this short clip.
You women out there, y'all petty, man.
Okay. First, as soon as he said, you women out there, you all petty, that just, I think a lot of people turned it off right there, but let's hear the rest of it. I know the volume's really low, but let's give it a shot.
Hey, LeBron, you're 100% right on these girls hating on Caitlyn Clark. Y'all petty girls. I expect men to be petty. We're the most insecure group in the world. You are. Y'all should be thanking that girl for getting y'all ass private charters, all the money and visibility she bringing to the WNBA. Don't be petty like dudes. Listen, what she's accomplished, give her flowers. Stop being petty, all you women out there.
All right, we get the idea. Stop being petty.
And I know most likely where you're going to go with this, but go ahead.
No, where do you think I'm going to go? Let's go with it.
I think you're going to go in the route of our physical therapy profession or the therapies in general. The online sentiment around many things, around our industry, around, corporates and mills and hiring and, I don't know, job and career choices and job satisfaction. And I'm assuming you liked the clip so much that you wanted to share it, because maybe, Tony, maybe you believe that a lot of therapists out there have a similar sentiment, and maybe you feel, I don't know, I'm just guessing, maybe you feel like Charles Barkley and wanting to say, hey, therapists, stop being petty. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I somewhere in the ballpark?
You are dead on exactly right. That is what makes you such a great therapist, is because you understand human nature. You can read people. You know what people are thinking before they verbalize it. Yeah, like We see it constantly. I'm guilty of it just as much as everybody else. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm above being petty. But we see somebody succeeding, and the first thing we go to is to tear them down. And I'm really impressed that you even mentioned the PT mills, because I agree. Like in my mind, they are clearly serving a specific demographic. They are clearly doing a great job in the service they deliver. They're serving the consumer at what the consumer wants, meaning a combination of quality, price, everything coming together. If they weren't doing that, they would not still be in business. So the bottom line is, no matter how much other therapists hate what we're referring to as a mill, those serve a purpose and they were there for a reason. Now, yeah, I agree. I think we're all subject to being petty. We see somebody succeed, we want to pull them down. I'm just blown away by the fact that now we see this. We see clips of other players, you know, cheap shotting Caitlyn Clark. There's all this buzz around it. And again, it's totally true. Like, she has brought notoriety, she's brought money, she's brought fame to the league, not even just her, but other players that haven't been able to achieve that kind of, you know, result. They can't stand it. It's burning them. They're getting so mad about it.
You know, it is what it is. And any popular person, like let's say, for example, I don't know how many physical therapists know Larry Benz. I mean, he owns or co-owns Confluent and Evidence of Motion, and Confluent owns 900, probably close to 1,000 locations, manages or co-owns or owns outright that many locations. So for years, Larry was the president of the private practice section for the APTA. He has done, to his credit, a ton of media. He's been on a ton of podcasts and webinars and town halls, and, you know, he's done a ton for the profession. But privately, different colleagues and friends and whatnot will take cheap shots at him, or people like that are in the spotlight, that are on the podium, that are on the stage all the time, that are on the microphone all the time, getting, you know, recognition, notoriety, whatever you want to call it, all that. And yeah, I mean, it's easy. It's easy to take shots at someone like that. And then there's a lot of therapists or practice owners that know him and agree with, like, the things that he's done. I mean, he's written books, he's done a ton of things. But then there's other owners and there's other physical therapists specifically that will take cheap shots at someone like that. And I think it's just easy. It's kind of like people, you know, years ago hating on LeBron James, and like, but, you know, now he's, I don't know, like second all time or whatever with scoring, or third. I mean, like, past Kobe. And, you know, I guess it's easy to take shots and find chinks in someone's armor or something like that. But anyone that's doing anything, right? So even you and I, and you know, you've gotten significantly more online exposure and all that. So I'm like, you know, trying to just keep up and keep my head above water. But with you and I putting stuff out there like this, like, there's always going to be someone that, like, says some issue that we said something wrong. I said something incorrectly, or they didn't like my stance on something or whatever. Anyone who's out there doing something, there's going to be some polarization. There's going to be some people that agree and some people that disagree. That just is what it is, right?
Yeah. And I think it's the greatest sign, obviously, that you're sharing innovative ideas, something, you know, worth discussing, something worth talking about. I shared a whole bunch of posts over the weekend that I want to get into a little bit on today's episode. Going back to Caitlyn for a second, in a previous PT Breakfast Club, you and I had talked about her 2 contracts. And again, there are so many parallels we can pull from this. So I pulled up the numbers on the screen. The WNBA 4-year contract was $338,000. The same person, the same activity, the same everything, also signed a $28 million contract with Nike. Now, I think that, would you remember, was that 8 years? It was a longer contract, but still a ridiculous tenfold better contract, more money. And one of the things that I messaged you about over the weekend was, I was like, let's talk about this, because I think it's so interesting, drawing a parallel between what she's going through and what a therapist would go through. She's never going to create a shoe, like literally in the factory. She's not going to sit at a machine and sew a shoe. She's not going to pack a box. She's not going to print a shipping label. She's not going to do anything that puts the shoes physically into this world or in a consumer's hand. Yet she's making hundreds or 1,000 times more than a factory worker in a Nike factory who's actually building and creating the shoe. And so this goes back to the therapist, the therapist who's so frustrated that they're killing themselves. They're working so hard. They come in early, they stay late. They put every moment of their day into providing the best possible patient care experience. And they're making a fraction of the amount of money that somebody else in the organization might be making who's never going to treat a patient. We see this example across multiple professions, multiple industry. And I think if you're that person sitting there frustrated that you're not making enough, you acknowledge it. You're like, all right, I need more to live. I need more to survive. The effort that I'm doing, I don't feel it's a fair exchange value. But then you don't get mad about it. You don't pout about it. You don't try to tear somebody else down. You recognize what they're doing that is higher perceived value. And you say, do I want to do that? A lot of you don't want to do that. A lot of therapists, don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to create the media. They don't want to do that stuff. But what else can you do to increase the value, to put the money in the bank account so that you're not stressed out about paying your student debt, about paying your mortgage, about, putting food on the table? Like literally there are therapists who probably are in situations where they're making decisions about, should I buy this or should I buy that, related to food on the table, because they're working as hard as they can and they just can't make ends meet. What are you thinking about that whole dynamic?
I had so my previous boss colleague Ed Mearsh had a similar story where there were different employees that would come and almost they would either say a comment or they would kind of attack him. He worked for he bought and sold practices even before Motion PT Group, and then he had that $250 million exit. So he's done a lot recently. But hold on, I got a plane flying by. I don't know if you can hear that or
no. You're fine. You can keep talking.
So Ed Mearsh had employees when I think he was working for Physiotherapy Associates or NovaCare Select Medical. I think maybe Select Medical because then it was public and the salaries were public, right? So he would have lower ranking team members approach him and say like, hey, I see that your salary, and I don't even know what it was at the time, but I mean, I don't know. It was over 100 grand. It might've been 250 grand. I don't even know what it was. But he would have lower ranking employees say like, almost like, hey, I saw in the financials of the the investor packet or the publicly available information that your salary is whatever. And, you're never here or you're not in this office. Like, what do you do? Or like, I only make this. And it goes back to, it doesn't mean that you, the individual if you're on the lower ranking side, it does not mean that you are not providing value. You're doing something for that job description. But someone that's like a senior vice president or in the C-suite or whatever, they're providing a different amount of value or a different value or a different value driver. And even if they're not treating patients and they're not actually producing revenue for the company, they're doing different things that you may not even realize, whether it's they're raising money, they're working on, ethical, legal compliance so that, it doesn't turn into Health South or whatever. Like there's a lot of things behind the scenes. And going back to the attacking, and try not to be petty or attacking a team member or a colleague or whatever, you want to fully understand where they're at and the value drivers of someone who's in senior vice president or C-suite can potentially move the needle in a bigger way in a short amount of time. And that's why they typically will get paid more. They have a potentially mission critical job responsibilities compared to a physical therapist who maybe is going to make 90 or 100K or something. And they're generating $230,000 in revenue or $250,000 in revenue. So, yeah.
Well, just real quick, looks like Scott's here from Health Motion. Scott, thank you for joining us again. So taking this Caitlyn Clark example, and let's try to tease out some of this. She's getting 28 million from Nike. She's, probably the easiest 28 million she's ever going to make in her life. She's getting, 300 whatever thousand from the WNBA. She's getting elbows in the face. She's getting hip checked to the ground. Like, she's getting beat up every single game, working as hard as she possibly can. How do you, I've got my ideas, but how do you look at that comparison to say, why is she getting so much more from Nike for doing so much less than she is in the league?
Well, I don't know. There's a couple ways to go through this, but with Nike will have some projected return on investment, right? They have to do some projections based off the individual, first of all. So they've done a ton of research. They've probably looked at, biometric or psychosocial, whatever graphics. And someone like LeBron or someone like Caitlyn Clark, as long as they stay out of trouble, then Nike should significantly have, I don't know what percentage of return on investment, but Nike will over time sell shoes, merchandise, clothing. I don't know if they go into anything else, media rights, or I don't know, autograph signings or anything like that. But they're selling merchandise. They're able to use the image and likeliness of Caitlyn Clark for advertisements, for banners, for things like that. And because the athlete, the LeBron James, or in this case, the Caitlyn Clark of the world, because of their style of play, their reputation, their skill level, how they're perceived by the public, that is where Nike probably makes some projections and say, so what was the dollar amount? 28 million from Nike?
Yeah, 28 million versus 338,000 or something.
Okay, so Nike will, I mean, they've been doing this even since before they signed Michael Jordan, or maybe Michael Jordan, I think, was the biggest when they used to have a budget for multiple athletes and they just spent it all on Michael Jordan, and that's how they landed Michael Jordan. So with Caitlyn Clark, they have to make some projections. Nike is a very large, savvy, multi-billion-dollar company. They make projections, and I don't know, it might be 3 or 4x, or it might be above 5x in terms of their return on investment for that $28 million. If I hire a physical therapist and I'm going to pay them, let's just say, easy numbers, let's just say $100,000, and they're going to generate $250,000. So they're generating more revenue than what I pay them. So that's how a business will pay out for whether it's hiring a physical therapist or it's Nike paying Caitlyn Clark some gigantic salary or whatever this contract is. So Nike looks at it as, here's the investment, because if Nike doesn't pay 28 million, Under Armour or Adidas or whatever, she's probably had multiple bids from her agent, from Reebok and Adidas and Converse or whatever, all these other companies. So that's maybe the going rate, and Nike, I'm assuming, I'm sure, will have some number that they believe, that contract will be worth 100 million or 128 million to Nike. And so if Nike can make an extra 50 to 100 million in that time span with her name and, shoes, clothes, t-shirts, whatever, with her name, and they're going to probably create a logo. That's another thing. Nike created a logo for Air Jordan. Nike created a logo for Kevin Durant. They're probably going to create some CC or whatever Clark, Caitlyn Clark logo for Nike. And Nike will probably retain that logo over time. And even if Caitlyn Clark gets a piece of the logo or any merchandise with the logo, Nike still gets upside. So that's how they make sense of it. We talked about this before, where the WNBA is a smaller, newer organization. There's just not a lot of ticket sales, merchandise, TV rights, contracts, all of that. And so therefore the total, and it's not, I don't think it's a fair comparison, because we mentioned NFL, NBA, all these others have been around for 60 to 100 something years, all the established top 4 sports. And so the WNBA is newer. And so therefore they just don't have the dollars flowing in and out of the whole organization. That's why her contract is $300,000 for WNBA. Nike's been around since what? The 70s or something. It used to be Blue Ribbon Sports in the, I don't know, 50s or 60s or 70s. And then it became Nike. So, and Nike's multi-billion-dollar company, and they already have this professional athlete contract. They have it all teased out. They have it all figured out. And so that's the biggest difference. It is, I think, worthwhile, but sometimes challenging for you and I, Tony, to cross the chasm and make a physical therapy comparison, because there's no big company, corporate or whatever, that's multi-billion dollars that's going to pay a physical therapist the Nike side of the contract, unless maybe you're Jimmy McKay, who's listening live, and he would be the type. And Jimmy says longer lever arms equals longer value, #physics. There are maybe some people like Jimmy McKay in the physical therapy world, or others that are producing content that then could potentially have the Caitlyn Clark side of the Nike deal with some physical therapy or healthcare corporate. But there's less of the Jimmy McKays of the healthcare world compared to the Caitlyn Clarks of the basketball world.
Yeah, you nailed it. Jimmy nailed it. When I run some quick numbers and do a little search, like Nike's market cap is 142 billion. The estimated market cap for the WNBA is 2.7 billion. I mean, such a tiny fraction of a percent. They don't have the resources. They don't have the budget. And they would never get the same return. They don't have the product. They don't have the reach that Nike does. And like you said, when you look at the franchise built around Air Jordans and what Michael Jordan did with the sneaker, there's nothing like that in the female market. So my kids, my wife, like, we're into sports, we're into basketball. I look across the landscape of girls basketball. This is probably the most exciting time that there's ever been for little girls to look at the WNBA and have higher aspirations to something like that. And there's no single shoe on the market that really is going to do what this can do for Nike. So there's huge opportunity, long lever, just like Jimmy said. And I think what we see in most PT practices, even at a larger scale, is we don't have that long a lever. Like, what's the greatest thing that even the best, most amazing physical therapist is going to do? They can only see so many patients. They only have so many billable units in a day. There's only so much, unless they're going to step out of the patient care role, unless they are willing to be that icon. And I've talked about this before. I think there's a space in the market for a therapist to step out and become a celebrity, to celebritize what we do in therapy. But so many of the best therapists, they don't want to do that. So what happens? You get an average therapist. You get a therapist like me, who I'm not the best therapist. I'm a good enough therapist. And so I'll step out. I'll take a social media platform. I'll put my opinions out there, but I don't necessarily represent the best in terms of patient care. And there's a void, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled out there. And so somebody hopefully watching this is going to step out there and fill it. Jimmy also said, like, look at the Google search data for WNBA over the past 12 months. I'm assuming it's because with Caitlyn's notoriety, that is climbing. So if the WNBA is going to make an investment in the future, like, this is the person. And let's be real, she checks all the boxes. When I listen to some of the clips of some of the other players that were fouling her in recent games, those are not the people that you want representing the organization. They're angry. They're frustrated. They're putting negativity out there, refusing to comment, refusing to answer questions, obviously because they don't want the spotlight on Caitlyn more than it already is. But all they're doing is digging a deeper hole, where she comes out, she rises above all of it. She doesn't say anything negative about anybody. She just says, this is what it is. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to play my best, and I'm going to try to help the team. So like, every single thing that is happening, all the dominoes are falling in her favor. So I think it's such a fascinating story to watch. And I think we can pull a lot of those parallels. I know I started the story. If you don't have anything else to say about it, let's skip over into productized services. Because I think this post I shared about LegalZoom yesterday led to some really interesting conversation. So for context, LegalZoom, $1.6 billion market cap. And before you came on, what I was saying was Health mention. He said, I thought you guys were the celebrity PTs. Yeah.
Tony is, I'm getting there. I'm trying to get there.
So for 100 years, if somebody wanted to start a business, you would hire an attorney, right? The attorney would draft these documents to create the corporation, the LLC, whatever is going to be. If somebody wanted a will, if somebody wanted a trust drafted, they would hire an attorney. They'd pay them an hourly fee. Eventually, that kind of evolved to the attorney just selling the price of the final document. And even for us, like my wife and I, we had wills made up as our kids were being born, and we did all of the things you need to do as a responsible adult. And, you know, it was like $1,500 or $2,000. But I guarantee the attorney we hired, we had no idea who we should hire. We had no idea who to go to. We kind of randomly picked somebody off word of mouth. And I'm sure that wasn't the first will he created. I'm sure he was working from a framework that he had created previously that he adapted for us. In the clinic, you know, I used to accept physical therapy students. I don't do it anymore because I'm not a good CI anymore because I'm not on site enough. But when I did, one of the first things we would talk about is like, look, if I get a patient who has a neck problem, a back problem, a hip problem, a knee problem, a shoulder problem, they all need to do the same basic stuff. They need to pick stuff up. They need to push. They need to pull. They need to carry. They need to lift. Like, so if I created a treatment of 10 things, those 10 things would probably help 90% of the referrals that are going to come through my door. Why do I feel compelled to do things differently, you know, for each different person? Because we're all humans. We all have the same basic structures and the same basic physiology. So I'm always trying to find that balance as a clinician between what should be systematized, because I know this works. I know the recipe to make. Last night we made chocolate chip cookies. They were amazing chocolate chip cookies. My 11-year-old loves cooking. He did everything from scratch by himself. He knows the recipe. He just follows the recipe. He doesn't need to get creative. And when you get creative, you can make something amazing or you can make something that's horrible. My point in this is we see LegalZoom come on the scene. They systematize a lot of the stuff that, you know, was fragmented across the market. And now instead of $3,000 or $5,000 for a legal document, you're getting it for $300 or $500. Is it as personalized and unique as an individual attorney would deliver? Maybe not, but is it good enough? If we know that most small businesses fail, do I need a $5,000 LLC created for me? Or can I get away with a $500 LLC? And then when that business proves itself, then I'll invest and get a better legal document that's more customized to me. I think that holds true for therapy. I think, you know, I was in the clinic this morning. Patient came in, post-op subacromial decompression. For reference, for everybody listening, I text Dave. I was like, hey, Dave, I've got an 8 a.m. evaluation scheduled. I'm going to go. People are going to hate this. I'm going to go. I'm going to get that evaluation done. And I'm going to be back at my house at the computer by 8:30. I live about 15 minutes away from my clinic. You do the math on that. But the fact is, it's a standard subacromial decompression. It's not even a rotator cuff repair. There's well-established protocols out there. Is it exactly what I would want to do if it was my program? Maybe not. Maybe I would do things differently. Maybe I would customize, but I'm not getting paid to do any of that. Plus, it's a proven recipe for success. I know if the patient does these things, follows these guidelines, they are going to do well 80% of the time. So let's reserve the quality of the therapist. Let's reserve what we do uniquely for the evaluation, for the planning, for the reassessment. And then if the patient proves me wrong, and the patient doesn't progress the way I would expect, then I will step back in for the more advanced protocol, the more advanced assessment, the clinical knowledge and skill. And so something like that 100% could be productized. And I think it opens the demographic. It brings the cost of care way down. It allows us to provide services to people who would not otherwise go to physical therapy. Before I go on, let me hear your thoughts and we'll see what the comments are saying.
This sounds like a terrible idea. Now that was my first reaction. I wanted to lead with that. That was my first thought. And then I thought, hold on, does Tony have something here? Hold on, hold the phone.
Yes.
Does he have something here? Could this be, well, first of all, first it would be an out-of-pocket service, right? So you kind of said like a protocol. Didn't you message that or it was in your post? It would be like the post-op protocols, for example.
Yeah, it would be self-pay in most cases. But like anything, they could be a hybrid model. Maybe you start self-pay, the patient gets into it. They're like, I need more. I don't understand. I push a button. I connect with a therapist. Of course, we see Hinge doing this. We see some of the other AI physical therapy services doing this. It doesn't have to be all or none.
So I was you sent this, I think last night or yesterday. And my first thought was, this sounds like a terrible idea. My immediate thought was, okay, LegalZoom is pretty big. It's been around for a while, maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years. It's been around for a while. You just said it was 1 billion in market cap. LegalZoom, the comparison is, I want an LLC. I want a deliverable. I want a document. I need a will. I need, I don't know, what are some of the other, I guess, LLCs, wills, trusts,
bill of sale, rental agreements, leases, all that
rental
stuff.
agreement, lease agreement. So those things are fairly binary. Either LegalZoom sends it to me or not, and it's going to be complete because it's been around long enough. Like it is there. I get the deliverable from LegalZoom. I get the document. Here's a piece of paper. I get the piece of paper, or I get it in an email, and that's it. And now I'm done with it. The challenge with your idea is that the person buys the same type of thing, like an email, like an attachment, a digital file that they could print out if they wanted to, or they would just have it digitally. The same thing if you and I buy an LLC or a trust or whatever, or a will from LegalZoom, we buy it and it probably automatically sends it to us, or it's in the LegalZoom account of ours, whatever. So it lives there. It's this digital thing. The challenge with your idea, as you know, is that the potential patient out there that has back pain or post-op knee surgery or whatever, they go on this hypothetical platform that you're talking about, a physical therapy version of LegalZoom. They buy the protocol, but then they have to go do the thing. They have to do the reps. They have to do the stuff, which you and I know humans are not typically great at. I agree. It would be amazing on the one end of the continuum to allow more access to people who don't have the money or the resources or the insurance to even go to a, quote unquote mill or whatever. So there's people that they don't have transportation. They can't go to an outpatient mill or corporate clinic or whatever you want to call it. Could this allow access to proven treatment that, like you said, is not the same thing as being with you and me in person? But it could be potentially the big pillars, the main pillars of what they would need, right?
Yeah.
So I think the comparison is, it's not as easy as LegalZoom on the deliverable side, because then the person then has to take the document and say, okay, where am I at? I'm 1 week post-op, or I have chronic low back pain, and here's what it's telling me to do on day 1 or whatever. And humans, humans need help with accountability and follow up and follow through and all that. And so this still could help some people. I was also thinking that this, you didn't mention it, but maybe you kind of have it infused in your idea, which would be someone like Tony, someone like, I don't know, Cameron Dennis, someone like Michael Derry, someone like David Bailiff, Mike Chua, anyone that's online that has some type of following. If they offered this, they could have some protocols be purchased by patients or potential people outside of state lines. I don't know how that would go, by the way. But they could also do what you've done with Clarity FM, where this could be something that shows that you have some extra legitimacy. And maybe it's easier for you to sell private pay services to someone who wants you and wants the full thing. And the people that can't afford the full thing in person, they buy this protocol from you, even if it's curated from this website. So my initial thought was terrible idea. Second thought was, hold on, this could be something that therapists can sell. They make it once, and it could certainly be at the end of 12 months or at the end of your first year, it could potentially be meaningful income.
So I love what Scott, and I'm assuming it's Scott here, says the big difference between a good cook following a recipe and a good chef. And you're right. Like you need cooks. They're I don't know, line cooks, and they just get out there and they crank out the same recipe over and over and over again. Then you have the chef who actually creates the menu, who looks at the big picture, who thinks about what the restaurant needs for the night, understands the consumer, understands the people coming in. I would say the chef, in my example, is creating the treatment protocol. And this is such an important element in this. Like, I've been at this long enough. I pretty well know what are the questions a typical patient with this condition is going to ask, or what are the questions the patient doesn't even know they should be asking, And so I can fill all of those questions with answers that I would put into video, or I would deliver it in some one-to-many deliverable solution. But as the chef, if I truly want to be compensated as a great chef, if I want to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, I need a scalable solution. I can't cook every meal, right? And that's why we have cooks, line cooks, who do the cooking. And for whatever reason, they're going to make a lot less than the head chef would make, but they're going to be happy and they're going to be satisfied. And there's tons of therapists out there who want to be that line cook. Awesome. And there was a time in my life that I wanted to be that line cook, literally as a cook or as a therapist or as anything else. The thing that you keep bringing up, and I'm going to reference like confirmation bias, because it's the same conversation you and I have had about manual therapy. There is a great therapist who was so kind to engage me in a back and forth in the comments to my post. And they said, there's so much power in human touch. It's therapeutic, human connections and those relationships and all of that. And I totally acknowledge it. But I also acknowledge that this feeds into that confirmation bias. Why does Dave Kittle only believe or think patients want manual therapy? The reason why patients are going to Dave is because they want manual therapy. Well, because Dave does manual therapy, and the patients who go to Dave want manual therapy. I would not go to Dave because I don't want manual therapy. If I was the patient, or even my family members that I talk to, they don't want to be touched. They don't want that connection. They have those boxes checked in other ways. And this was something that I said for myself. Like, I don't want socialization, but I'm not a 72-year-old living alone, right? I get more socialization than I want in a day. I get more human contact than I want in a day. If somebody, and I'm not saying there's no power in the human touch, but I get it from my kids. I get it from my dog. I get it from my wife. I don't need to pay somebody to give it to me. I am the person you never hear of. I am the person you never see, because I am the person that's never going to go to a physical therapist. I am not going to do that. But if the door was open to say, oh, now I have a solution that didn't exist before. Now, yeah, I see patients, Dave, I'm sure you see patients. They go on Google, they research, they're intelligent, they're educated, they're successful. They know how to find the right information. Like, I have no problem with therapy or patients searching information, especially when they understand how information works. You're like that. You learned Google Ads. You figured that out because that was something that you wanted to know about. Right. And so there are people out there who can do this stuff. I just want to provide a platform for them that allows them to do what they want to do keeps them out of the clinic, lets them do it for a fraction of the cost, gives them the same access to care. We just don't. We ignore it because what do we see in the clinic? We see the patient that doesn't want to go to therapy, but is forced to because of the doctor. We see the patient who doesn't want to pay a $25 copay. We see the patient who only comes for the massage. Those are the things we're used to, but we don't see that person who wants to be self-led, who wants to be told, you know, give me the education and then let me go do it on my own. Those are very few, but that's a big demographic.
All right. So let's say we have a bunch of people watching live right now. So let's get a little tactical, Tony. Could we, let's say a therapist watching, listening wants to do this. They want to offer this. They want to make some of these. I think it could be as simple as this. You go find some protocols, maybe you edit them, you change them, you make them unique to you, your preference, whatever that you've seen that works. You should also maybe speak to a lawyer and or ChatGPT about some section of having some liability and release form or something if someone's going to buy this. Okay, let's say we check that box, we move on. Pricing. Are you thinking like 25 to 50 bucks per protocol, per self-treatment? And should we call it self-treatment? And then, so let's start with that. Is that like, I think good pricing? I mean, 25 to 50. I think if it's under 25, I think I've seen ebooks and things sold on websites for like $5 and $10, and it's like, why bother? I don't know. Like that, maybe that's just me, and maybe I'm wrong. And that website sells a ton, but on volume. But the practice websites that we've seen don't have a ton of volume. So I'm kind of thinking like in the 25 to $100 range, maybe $50. What are you thinking in terms of pricing and like kind of now comparing to LegalZoom? I know those are like hundreds of dollars. I guess some therapists could charge multiple hundreds of dollars, or the second part of that conversation will be, I know you're going to say adding in either phone calls or group calls or a TENS unit and video training and kind of bundling it together. But let's talk tactical and pricing and offerings for this.
Yeah, a couple people have said, and you've kind of referenced, I'm not necessarily talking about a PDF document or an ebook. I would say a series of videos that I agree. You go out and you grab a professional cited rehab protocol, and it could be for anything. It could be post-surgical, it could be neurological, it could be pediatric, it could be whatever. You grab that resource that's already out there, probably created by a well-respected organization, Mass General, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical, any of those guys. You adapt it to what you do. You go through a series of videos, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You deliver all of this. It's an educational piece of content. I would think, and this is, we can have a long discussion about pricing, but you got to test the market. You know, I'm always a believer, and you start way above what you're comfortable with. You could always discount it. You could always add sales and specials and things like that. But I wouldn't even mess with something that wasn't $100, $150. Even if I brought the price down on special to $49, but it has to be that kind of purchase that's 1/10 the value of actual therapy. And you can determine the dollar value of therapy as, if somebody's going to go with a referral for 12 visits, that's going to be $1,200, right? So $120, totally reasonable. You could say, you know, if they were going to choose a cash pay provider, it's going to be $3,000, $300 product, totally reasonable. Or if it's going to be a copay, $50 copay, the actual cost to the client, 10 visits, $500, you can make it a $50 product. However you want to go. But yeah, I think somewhere in that range, $50 to $150, a series of videos with some supplemental content. You could have curated content, meaning I go on YouTube, I find the best of the best information. Like there's a ton of great pain science info out there. I can just bring that into the program that I'm delivering. Curating that content is very valuable for the consumer.
I love that. I thought you were going to go under 100, but the fact that you're over 100, you're already speaking my language. I love it. And if it's over $100, more likely the buyer is going to take it a little more seriously. They're going to have a little more skin in the game. And guess what? You know this. They're going to be more likely to actually do the follow through and complete the exercise, the self treatment or whatever. And I know I like your distinction of saying that it's an educational offering or educational piece of content. And so does that mean you would not say the word treatment, or you would not have self-treatment in there? It would be specifically for educational purposes only, even though someone could take themselves through post-op ACL, post-op knee replacement, whatever, and maybe they only need to go to an office once a week or once every 2 weeks, and then the rest they do at home through this offering. But do you suggest, and again, we're not lawyers, you should speak to your lawyer, do you suggest that therapists say that it's educational in nature only and not treatment or self-treatment or anything like that?
Yes, because it is. And because when you think of the psychology of the consumer we're targeting, that is what they're looking for. If they were looking for treatment, if they were looking for hands-on, if they wanted you to do it to them, they would go and hire you. That is not what they're looking for. They're looking for a do-it-yourself program that teaches them what to do, that teaches them what to look for, that gives them the tools and the resources, just like we did in PT school. And this is where I always go back to, like, there are these, every therapist that I talk to goes straight to like worst case scenario, the most complicated case in the world. I'm like, look, yes, there are those outliers, but most of the time there's a bell curve, 95% that falls under the center of the bell curve, 2 standard deviations away. I'm not a statistician, so bear with me. We can serve that community. And I learned, right? At some point, we all learned, how do I treat a patient with Parkinson's? How do I treat a patient with a rotator cuff repair? I didn't go to school to learn how to treat Bob Smith because Bob Smith is a unique individual. I went to school to learn how to treat Parkinson's, how to treat total knee replacement, how to treat the condition. And that's basically what we're providing. We're providing the solution to treat the condition. There's going to be anomalies. There's going to be, outliers. There's going to be this stuff, but let's open that door. And what happens? Even if I just sell 10, 20, 30 a week or a month or a year, that's extra money that goes into my bank account that allows me to work with the more complicated cases that do need my direct attention, that do need my clinical brain to figure out what's going on. But if I waste all my time on the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that doesn't need real clinical thought, that's where I think, plus one more solution here. We don't have enough clinicians for the demand. So, in my area, still, we're talking multiple weeks. We're talking 3 to 6 weeks on average for a patient to schedule a new evaluation. If I can absorb a lot of the easy stuff, get it out of the system, I can allow patients to get in quicker. More complicated patients who actually need therapists, who are using their clinical brains. It increases like access, it increases value, it solves a lot of problems.
Love it. Anything else with the LegalZoom of physical therapy protocols? We talked pricing, we talked offerings. Would you suggest that they use like gumroad.com or that they use some other website to link to have the document there? I've used gumroad.com, but I don't know. I know you mentioned other platforms and other apps and things like that over the years. Probably better for them to just use some other website that takes a cut to fulfill it, or did they make this a PDF, they link it from their website, they put up a PayPal or a Stripe payment portal or whatever. They still have to pay a cut to the credit card processor. Maybe it's a little less. What are their options there?
Yeah, I think a percentage of millions is much better than, 0% of $10. I think the next step for this is you look at, okay, what are similar services that are out there? We know Prehab Guys have their app, they have their program. You and I have discussed that several weeks ago. Kelly Starrett was another name that came up. He has some online courses that patients can buy. There used to be, and man, I want to say Rob Vining might have interviewed this guy. Somebody interviewed this guy. I thought he was an Australian therapist. I don't remember if it was called iMove, or there was an app where he had a ton of post-op protocols that were available for patients. It was like $10 a month. It was an awesome program, but I completely lost touch with what's going on with this. He did an interview with somebody. I'm going to go try and find it. There are examples out there. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We model the success that's already existing. And even when you look at LegalZoom, they do have services. They have upgrades where you could pay to talk to a lawyer. You can go into groups that they have on specific topics. We see that natural evolution in these businesses. And even though LegalZoom today is 1.6 billion market cap, it wasn't that when they started. So this is where I think you find the therapist is the chef who creates the original formula, the recipe, but they get connected with maybe venture capital. They get connected with an engineer that's going to build the hardware and the platform to deliver the service. Most of us want to try and duct tape everything together. But if we really want to create the next billion-dollar company in this model, I think we need to look at how others have done it. And as I go down this road, I realize it's way easier than any of us ever expected. I was watching a video, and I know we're getting close to the end. They were saying that even though it's harder today to raise capital, to raise funding than it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the limiting factor for investors who want to deploy capital isn't capital. They have the money. It's finding founders who have ideas and who have the motivation to put into a new business. So every single person who's tuned in today, we're still at 11 eyeballs on this. They have the idea, they have the motivation, they have the inspiration. And I would say you guys have been honing the sharpness of your blade in the most challenging, difficult, unrelenting market. If you just took half the skill that you've developed in healthcare and matched it with venture capital and maybe a tech founder, I think it's unbelievable what could be produced. We just don't have that connection yet. What are you thinking?
I'm good. I don't know if you want to do parting shots or if you have any final.
Yeah, let's hit a parting shot. What are your thoughts from today?
Well, I do like bringing back the Caitlyn Clark and the comparison to the physical therapy world about the sentiment around. But I don't want to leave on that. So we'll talk about the continued reminder to think outside the box, the LegalZoom comparison, the LegalZoom idea for physical therapy protocols and treatment. But again, you're going to call it an educational offering. I do agree with you 100%, Tony, that the people buying it, that potentially would be buying it, would actually be buying it as an educational program and not necessarily treatment, even though it kind of is self-treatment. But again, the ones that really want the hands-on manual therapy, the accountability, the patients that say like, how does my knee look? I was in here 2 days ago. How does it look now? How does it feel? Like that. Those people probably won't buy this type of thing because they want the actual treatment. This can open up a lot more access to people in socioeconomic areas that maybe don't have the resources and the ability to get to an office or to even have, Luna home visits or concierge pain relief home visits or whatever it might be. So I love the idea. All of you continue to think outside the box. Give us some feedback on this. Let us know if this makes some sense and if you actually take some action and do some of this. If you start offering some of these protocols on your website or anywhere else on social media, we'd love to see it. We'd love to give you some feedback or our thoughts on it. So that's my parting shot. How about you, Tony?
I'm going to say, and Jimmy has it here. If you're not satisfied, if you're not happy, if you're not getting the result you want for the effort you're putting in, just remember your basic physics, right? Work is force times distance. We need a longer lever. You get a long enough lever, you can move the earth. We just need a longer lever to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. Dave, as always, thank you so much for being here. Everybody who's been watching, thank you so much. Join us Thursday at 8:30 a.m. We'll see you then.